your organization focuses on economics as opposed to what I think a lot of progressives think of in terms of a human rights issue when it comes to immigration, and compassion is the emotion, not necessarily pragmatism. Why is it that you focus on economics?
That's a great question. When we started 7 years ago, there had been a rich field of immigrant rights groups who were doing absolutely incredible work, focused on human rights, as you suggest, on families, on compassion, and on the moral case for immigration. I think, and that's a profound and very important case. And what ended up happening is that you had that on the left, and on the right you had people talking about law and order and national security and effectively just shouting past each other.
It's not only shouting past each other, but it kind of puts you in a weaker position.
Very much so, and I think what ends up happening is that immigration becomes the issue people use in elections to gin up their base. And so Mike Bloomberg in New York City 7 years ago looked around New York City, and immigration means a very different thing in New York City. Yes, it means families, and yes, it means human rights, and it also is an issue that deals with security. But the big thing for New York City is that we are the great immigrant destination of the world. People come to New York City because they want to have a better life and they want to grow the economy, and we benefit immensely from it. If you look around New York City, 48% of businesses are started by immigrants. And so let's take a look, like there should be a conversation about economics. Not to say that the compassion and the moral and the human rights case is not there, it is there. But that if you can have a conversation about economics, about how immigration drives our economic growth, how it helps our economy, one, you'll get better policy. But two, politically, you have a way that Republicans and Democrats can actually talk and take this from an election issue to one that we can actually legislate on.
Let's say you're talking to someone out in rural, Pennsylvania, and they don't want America to look like New York City. They like it the way it is.
Well, look, I think the reality of America is that in an increasingly globalized world, we don't have a huge amount of competitive advantages over everyone else. But one competitive advantage we do have is that people want to come here. When they vote with their feet, they come to America, and that's been hugely impactful for us, right? If you look at the great American companies, our Fortune 500 companies, 40% of them were founded by an immigrant or a child of immigrants, and that's no less true today. And so what I would say to someone in rural Pennsylvania is we want an economy that's dynamic, that grows. We want to bring a diverse skill set, and we have the benefit of having some of the greatest universities of the world and a huge amount of talent here in America. But if we can get immigrants and people who are going to come and work hard at all ends of the economy and help us grow, that's going to create more jobs and create more prosperity. It's going to be good for American workers too. Right now, if you look at the high skilled end, at science, technology, engineering, and math, there are more than 12 jobs posted online for every unemployed STEM worker. The economy is not a zero-sum game, so it's not the kind of thing where, okay, well, all right, well, what do you care if an immigrant has a job or it goes unfilled? What's the difference? Well, the difference is that if you can fill those jobs, you create jobs. We did a great study with a conservative think tank here in Washington, D.C., the American Enterprise Institute, several years ago, looking at, all right, well, what happens when you can take those STEM grads that we're training in our universities, that come from around the world to study at our best universities, if you can keep them here working in U.S. companies? And what ends up happening is that for every one we keep who gets a graduate degree in STEM and stays here working in the U.S., you create 2.5 additional American jobs. And those aren't just STEM jobs. What's important about those jobs, those could be support jobs, those could be manager jobs, those could be jobs in a lot of different fields where Americans do have the right skill set. If you look at government data, there's 6 million jobs we can't fill. And the problem is that we don't have exactly all the right skill sets, we're not in the right places. But if we can have a more dynamic economy, we can create jobs that Americans can fill and want to fill. We need to invest in a STEM pipeline so that Americans are going and gaining the skills that we need in our economy. But that's a multi-year, multi-generational thing to do. In the meantime, we have the advantage that the people around the world with the top skills in the world want to be here. And so do we want the next iPhone made in an American company or made at a company in South Korea or somewhere else? If we want it made in America and the jobs that come with that here, then we need to have the talent, we need to have the engineers, we need to have the computer scientists, we need to have the people who can innovate.
So my experience in the immigration issue, and that's basically my transition from filmmaking to this kind of political news reporting, was when my home community in Prince William County, Virginia, was besieged with anti-immigrant activists from all over the United States posing as my neighbors and basically intimidating the Board of Supervisors into passing a law that requires police to check immigration status based on appearance. What happened was as long as it was compassion or law and order, it was just a slam dunk. Even the 2 Democrats on the Board of Supervisors said, I'll go with law and order. But when the business community came up and said, actually, Now that you've started doing this, we're losing really, really productive workers. We're losing people who are starting businesses. Our home values are dropping because people are abandoning mortgages that they were paying. That was when it switched, and they actually ended up repealing the law.
And increasingly what you're seeing is for the laws that have been successful, like in Arizona, there have been huge negative economic consequences. People aren't going there because they don't want to have their events there. You're losing a huge amount of workers that are vital. I mean, we talked earlier about STEM and high-skilled immigration. High-skilled immigration is hugely important to our ability to out-innovate the world, but it would be a mistake to think that the only immigrants we need are high-skilled. Right? You look at industries across the economy, I mean, if you look at agriculture, our agriculture industry simply could not survive without immigrant labor. Now, we could decide that we don't want to have a $100 billion agriculture industry in the United States, but if we want to have a $100 billion agriculture industry in the United States, we have to be realistic about where we're going to get the workers from.
So how does a low-skilled worker create jobs? Someone who's not going to start a business, someone who's just going to work as a dishwasher, how does that person create jobs for the native-born Americans?
It's all over the spectrum. So you think about the economy as an interlinked economy. Again, like, it's not just one job goes to an American or goes to a native-born. If you're a home health aide, you're going to help someone who then all of a sudden can work instead of having to take care of their elderly parent. If you are a farm worker, you're going to help someone who's going to create a manager job, a shipping job, a bookkeeping job. There are lines, I think a really good example comes to the fisheries industry right now. If you go to Louisiana and the Gulf, or you go to Northern Neck, Virginia, you have crab processing and oysters and all sorts of seafood processing companies that simply, if they can't get the workers to work the really hard jobs in their processing line, the whole company's shut down.
So then other people lose jobs.
And the truckers, the fishermen, the bookkeepers, all these jobs go with them. And so I think that's the reality of our economy, is that we need all sorts of jobs, and jobs are related.
I interviewed some people at an alt-right conference, and I put the economic argument to them. I talked about the fact that there is an unhealthy ratio of retirees to workers in the United States. There was a baby boom in this country and in other countries that participated in World War II, and subsequent generations have not reproduced at the same level. And so we now face this dire situation where the ratio of workers to retirees is getting lower and lower, and without immigration, that ratio is going to be untenable, and we won't be able to take care of our senior citizens, and also our economy will grind to a halt because there won't be enough producers, and that immigration is actually a net good regardless of the race of the people who come here.
If that were a motive for immigration, why do we let in so many Guatemalans, Haitians, Vietnamese, Hmong, who have no skills practically, who don't even speak English? And even if immigration were a boon to the economy in some absolute sense, I do not want my people, European Americans, to be replaced by outsiders. I'm prepared to be poorer, even poorer, if that means that I live in a nation in which my destiny can unfold without the unwanted embrace of others.
What the man said to me was, that may be true, but it's more important that America's politics be dominated by white people. We have to have all the power, and if the economy fails as a result of us seeking policies that are driven only by that motivation, so be it. How do you respond to that argument?
Right. The question is how you reach people where the economic argument doesn't touch.
Yeah.
There is a group of Americans, as you're suggesting, who are, what bothers them most about immigration isn't even taking our jobs. What bothers them most is having to hit 1 to speak English when they call the operator instead of hitting 2 to hablar en español. And that will bother people. But that's reality. That's a small group. I think for the vast majority of Americans who feel uneasy about immigration, there might be some element of culture, but the reality is what they care about, there's a changing society. And I think if you can convince Americans of what history has shown over and over again, which is that immigration is actually a very helpful thing in helping us meet each new challenge, then I think it's easy to win. It is possible to win over a huge segment of Americans. Are you going to win everyone? No, because there are people where, again, like you said, it's not the economy, culture is going to dominate. But for the vast majority of Americans, what they care about is the economy and jobs. That's what voters go to the polls on. I think one of the things you see over and over again is that the most immigrant-heavy parts of this country are often the most tolerant. But that doesn't come right away. Right? And so increasingly what's happening now is immigrants are moving from the coast and the border to places where they've never been before. The immigrant gateway cities are no longer New York and LA, they're Nashville and they're in Arkansas and places like that. And the reality is that is going to be difficult for a time. But I think as we focus on integration, as we focus on showing the strengths of immigration, I think that will help change society.
So now we're going to go to audience questions. Thank you, Brenda Neubauer, for asking or saying, we have work permits for what you were talking about. All illegals must leave, enforce our laws. These people are criminals, not immigrants. Immigrants are waiting to come here legally.
Let me talk a little bit about the idea that people should come in line. I think that's right? Like, we want to be a country, we have to have laws, and we have to take control of our borders. We have to take control of who comes here and who doesn't. And it is a complete failure that we don't know who comes into our country and who leaves. Like, that we have to have a society that works. We don't want people coming here illegally, and I think it is a problem to law and order to have 11 million people who are living in the shadows. Having said that, we are not going to deport 11 million people, many of whom have been here 10 years or decades or longer, who are not, if they are not criminals, if they're productive members of society. We're not going to do it, one, because I think it's not the right thing to do, but two, we're not going to do it because we simply don't have the capacity or the will to do it. We appropriate enough money to deport 400,000 people a year. We don't appropriate enough money to deport 11 million people. And so I think we have to be realistic and we have to be pragmatic, which means that we have to give people a way to get right with the law, but we don't want to encourage people to come here illegally. And so I think we have to absolutely take measures to take control of our borders and make sure that employers are playing by the rules and that there's a path to come here legally. The idea that people should come and get in line, though, is a fallacy for a lot of people in the rest of the world, right? That there is no line. If you are not a STEM worker or fill a very specific need, for many people there simply isn't a line to come here. And we have jobs that hire them. And I think that's a problem from our employers, it's a problem from our system of laws, it's a problem for the way this works. And so I think absolutely we need comprehensive reform that takes control of our borders, that gets people right with the law, but that changes the incentive structure so that people are coming here the right way and there are avenues to come here the right way. Right? We need to have visas that recognize that we need these workers, we want workers, and we need to have more protections for Americans. And the reality is we don't have any of that right now, and that's the reason to have reform.
So Yvonne, interesting comment. She's talking about ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. So where you find conservatives who want comprehensive immigration reform and want basically to protect the fiscal solvency of the United States government and its economic well-being, there's always a suspicion that they're just doing it, for their own bottom line. What do you say to people who are especially suspicious of the elite or of the business community?
I think people come to this from a lot of different reasons, but I would say the coalition of people who support comprehensive immigration reform is not just not rich elite CEOs. Certainly business supports it, but so do evangelicals, so do libertarians, so do progressives, so do faith leaders of all sorts of different religions. And I think people come to it because it's the right thing to do, it's the economically sound thing to do. And when you look at the comprehensive immigration effort from 3 years ago, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said it would raise $900 billion. That's $1 billion over 20 years. And you think about all the things that we want to do, but we don't want to raise taxes, we can't pay for them. Well, having $900 billion is a lot of wiggle room to do a lot of good. I mean, that does benefit everyone. We are a different country now than we were a generation ago. There are millions of Americans who look at their future and think that their future is less bright than it was for their parents. And they're not wrong about that. Like, globalization, automation has brought huge gains to society, but it hasn't brought them equally. And so I understand that if you're someone, and I get there's cultural aspects and there are aspects to go to, but there are a lot of people who are not wrong to think that this economy and the changes that are happening are not working for everyone. I think what is unfortunate is that immigration gets scapegoated as the cause of that. But to a very large degree, immigration is much more the potential solution than it is the cause, right? We're not the only country that's undergoing this change. Like, Japan is seeing a very similar change. They have no immigration. The reality is what we have that Japan doesn't have is that we have young workers who can help us with diverse skills to help us meet the new economy and be dynamic and create those jobs. And so I think if we think about immigration in that way, it's not saying open borders. It's not saying everyone should come here. They shouldn't. We should be thoughtful about how do we protect American workers? How do we have an economy that does work for everyone? But immigration is a way to do that, not a threat to that.